What's going on, everybody? It's Connor from T-sportline. Today we're going to be installing pod lights on our CTX bumper kit. These pod lights are going to be great for lighting up our trails and any off-roading we're going to be doing. Now, our CTX bumpers got the ability to have fog lights in the corners as well as top lights on top of the bumper, so we're going to be installing both of those today. In front of me, I've got our 4-pod fog light kit. Now, this kit's going to come with 4 pods, 4 brackets, and the hardware to pair, 2 DTY cables, a long DT harness, and a short DT harness. Now, if you also get the top light kit, you're going to get 4 additional pod lights, as well as 4 additional brackets and pairing hardware, 2 additional DTY cables, and 2 additional short DT harnesses will be included. Tools for this kit are going to be a 17mm wrench, a 16mm hex, a 5mm hex, a T30, some zip ties, and a cutting tool. Some pods will use a 5mm Allen bolt on the side mounting, and some will use a T30 mounting bolt on the side. This depends on the brand of pod and the type of pod it is, so we'll be working with both today. Now, we already have our DC power converter installed. If you do not, we will have a video coming out on our channel here soon. For this install today, we're going to use our DC to DC voltage regulator. Now, this regulator is only intended to handle 8 lights pulling no more than 350 watts. So if you're intending on using a setup with more than 10 lights pulling more than 350 watts, or you are going to use the Morimoto HXB pod light kit, you're going to need to install our external 12-volt battery system. So moving on to the car, I'm going to take my really long DTM cable here, and we're going to plug one end into our voltage regulator here. And then we're going to take the other end, and we are going to route this up across the front of the car, kind of tucking it behind all these other wires up here. We're going to run this the whole length of the nose. And I like to tuck it up under the headlight here, and then down out the hole by the fender liner. Pull our extra through, and you can see we got a really long amount of excess here, and because we're going to have the Y cable going to our 2 pod lights, we're going to get an extra length on this, so we really don't need all this length. So we're going to take and pull this harness up until we have about 6 inches or so hanging down, and we're going to wrap up our excess and tie wrap it out of the way. So I've got my excess looped up here, and I'm just going to take a tie wrap and put it around, and I'm going to hook it up to this little plastic corrugated tube that's running across the center, that's shielding some of our factory harness. We're just going to zip tie that right there, grab our cutters and snip the tail, and that is one side of our fog lights done. Next, we're going to grab our shorter harness, and we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to route it down the passenger side fender well. So plug in one end to your voltage regulator, and then we're going to route the wires. Again, I like to go up underneath all these other factory wires that we have. It kind of makes our install look a little neater, a little cleaner. And we're going to take this and just, again, pull our length all the way through. And then you can see, once again, we got a good bit of excess, so we're gonna pull this back till about 6 inches remaining, and then we'll tie up the excess. And I'm gonna grab a tie wrap, and I'm gonna put it pretty close to that other loom we just put in, so that everything is pretty close together and easy to find if we ever need to remove anything. And just like that, the wiring for our fog lights is done. Now you'll have a couple dust boosts you can put on top of these 2 remaining DT connectors here. We are also going to install our top pod lights on the bumper today, so we're going to leave these open, as we'll be putting a couple more harnesses into this. So now moving on to the wiring for our top lights. We've got our 2 additional DT harnesses here, the 2 shorter ones, and we're going to plug these guys in to one of those remaining green and black DT plugs, and we are just going to run the male end down the top of our plastic radiator cover, and then we are going to gently push down on the air inlet until we can pull our DT connector out. And again, you can see all this lovely excess that we have. So we're going to take this and pull it back until we've got about 3 or 4 inches on these. You got to remember we are going to have some Y cables coming off of this, so we won't need a ton of length because the Y cables will give us that. So we're going to wrap up our excess, and we'll do that for both of our harnesses. Take our zip tie and tie wrap that up with the rest of our harnesses. And we will do that one more time for our second short harness. We're going to take our length here, and you're going to push it just down the top of the radiator here, and then you're going to pull down on this top plastic here. Just push down very gently, don't need a ton, pull that other length out. And we'll tie up our excess just like before. Snip that last zip tie tail. And with that, our wiring side is all finished. We can move on to putting the pod lights on the bumper. Putting our pods together, this pod here is going to be our combo light. So this is going to go on the top of our bumper. So we're going to mount our bracket so that the bracket is holding on the bottom. Now your fog lights in the corner, we've got some flood wide beams that we're going to put in there, and you're going to mount your brackets up top because those will be hanging rather than standing on the bracket. So we're going to get to installing that real quick. We're just going to pull our bolts out the side of the pod. Take our bracket and set this up in there. Get one side started, and then start our other side. And then I'm going to position it kind of mostly level with a little bit of up beam. I think that's what we're going to want from our bumper. And that's going to be our assembled pod. We're going to do that for the other 3 pods. And then we'll put those on the bumper. So I've got our fog light here, and we're going to take, and these are going to go in the corner of our bumper. So these are going to be our hanging pods. These are our wide beam, more of a floodlight. And so our bracket is going to sit on top like this, as these will be hanging from the bumper. We're going to get one side started and get our second side started. And we're going to try and hold this about level, and then grab our 5mm Allen key and just tighten it down. And we do want to make sure that we get these pretty tight off the get-go, as we are not going to be able to reach these 5mm head bolts once it is in the bumper. So you will still have a little bit of adjustment up and down, but we want to make sure that these are pretty good and tight. So this is going to be our assembled pod, and we're going to do the same thing for the other 3 pods. So I've got our CTX front bumper sitting on the ground in front of me, and I've got it face down on a moving blanket so we don't scratch any of the bumper. Now there's a few different places that you can put pod lights on this bumper. You're going to have 2 mounting positions, left and right, for your fog lights, as well as 4 spots on the top face of the bumper. And this bumper can be optioned with a bull bar, and that bull bar does have an additional 4 mounting points for a pod light. So starting with our fog light on the edge, we're going to take and put our bracket side up, and we're going to put this guy in and go ahead and get our washer on, and then our nylock. You're going to need to grab your 17mm wrench, and we're just going to tighten him down. And the bolt on this bracket is keyed to lock itself in place. So you should just need a 17 and a little bit of tension on the pod light itself. And we do have some side-to-side adjustability in that bracket. We're going to pull ours all the way to the side. As you can see, this bolt right here, we weren't able to access that, and we want to make sure it's not getting up in the side of the bumper there. So we'll get that pretty close to tight, not fully locked down. We want to wait until we get our second pod light in to make sure everything is positioned and aligned the way we want it. So grabbing our second pod, we're going to take and do the same thing. Put our pod up, put the washer on, get our nylock started, and then with our 17 wrench, tighten this on down. And we're gonna leave those with just a little bit of movement in them so that we can flip the bumper over once we get the other side done and align them side to side and angle them the way we want them, and then we will tighten everything down fully. So moving on to our top mounts here, we're going to have 4 rubber grommets filling up the mounting holes. So we're just going to pop those out from the inside. And set those to the side. We won't be using those again. So you're gonna take your pod and slot it into place, washer on the back, and then get your nylock started. Just like our fog lights, we aren't going to tighten these down fully. We still want a little bit of movement in them so we can get everything centered and aligned properly. Now we're gonna do this process 3 more times. All right. So now that we've got our front pods installed, I like to go ahead and put my Y cable in now while it's easy to access the back of the pods. I'm gonna take my DT connector and go ahead and plug that in until she clicks, and then take the other side and plug that into the adjacent pod. And that's 1 pair done. We'll do the same for the other pair. Push until we hear the click, push until we hear the click, and those are all wired up now. So we're good to flip the bumper upright and align everything how we want it before we tighten everything down. Now that we've got our bumper flipped upright, I'm looking at my top mount pods here, and you can see they're a little wonky, not straight and aligned. So we're gonna take a look at our bolt down here that we just put in, and you're going to middle that bolt on the slot there. Try to align it the best you can. We're gonna do that for each of our pods. And then once we have that done, we're going to look top down and do our best to just keep our pods kind of straight and as pointed forward as possible. Now you can put a little bit of angle on those outer pods to increase your spread of light, but I think we're going to just shoot forward since we also have our fog lights installed. So once we got those aligned, we're just gonna keep a hand on each of our pods and go back underneath. That's gonna be our top pods all tightened down. So you're going to take your fog lights, and we want them pointed straight. So we're going to have them aligned forward and back. So don't try and align them to this face here. They're not going to spread light like you are going to want. You want them pointed straight this way. So we're gonna do our best to kind of get those angled up close to the same. And once we get that, we will put a hand on it and tighten it down. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Just get those aligned and then tighten them down. And just like our top lights, it is easier to go ahead and put our Y cable in now before we get the bumper installed. So we're just gonna go ahead and plug those cables in until we hear the click. And we'll do that for both sides. Now that we've got all of our pod lights assembled, we're gonna go ahead and hang the bumper on our truck. So now we have our front bumper up. We are inside of the winch compartment here. You're just gonna take these and plug these up and into your Y cable tails. And then we're going to tuck our cables back up out the way like that. And then we are going to move on to our fog lights. So we've got our wires here, but we are able to access them because we don't have a winch in right now. So if you do have a winch with this kit, you will need to plug these wires in as the bumper is being installed. You won't have access into this compartment here where we are working right now because there will be a winch and a controller in the way. If you do have a winch setup paired with this, go ahead and plug these cables up as the bumper is being hung on the car. So I've got my connector off the car here and then our Y cable from our pods. We're just gonna go ahead and plug those in together, and you can see all this excess length we're gonna have. And we're just going to wrap this up out of the way and zip tie that up together. So I zip tied all of my harness up together, and then I zip tied that bundle of cables up to that silver aluminum bracket you see there. We're gonna do the exact same thing for the other side of fog lights. So now that we are inside the car, I'm gonna show you how to turn those lights on. So that whole system is hooked up to your front power feed option. So you're gonna go into your car menu here, go to outlets and mods, and you'll see front power feed. If we switch that on, it'll turn on all of those front bumper lights. So we finished up our install with our DC to DC converter. Those lights that we installed stay within our 350 watt output limit that the truck can handle. So we're going to take a look here at an example of what the external 12 volt system would look like and how to wire up your pod lights to that. If you're using anything more than 350 watt draw, or you are trying to put more than 8 lights on your vehicle, you'll need this kit here, as well as if you're putting a winch on that bumper, this box will be needed as well. So your wiring harness for this setup is going to look a little different than the wiring harness you got with our DC to DC system. So the main things to look at when you're looking at this harness are you're gonna have 5 wires coming out of it. 2 of the important ones are gonna be your battery positive and your battery negative. You see I've got these hooked up already. Second set of wires that is important to know about is you're going to have 2 DT plugs labeled light 1 and light 2. These are gonna go off to your pod lights, to your Y cables, whether you're using ditch lights, you're going for the fog lights, these are going to the bumper, whatever lights you choose, that's what these guys are gonna be for. Lastly, you're gonna have a really long harness here, but you're not gonna need to worry about that. We're just gonna tie it up and tuck it out of the way. That's going to be the receiver for your Bluetooth remote. All of these lights are going to be able to turn on and off with a wireless remote here. The last thing on that harness is going to be your relay block. We're going to be able to zip tie this up out of the way behind our trunk panel in the front compartment. So I've got our relay harness that's going to be stitched up here. We're gonna zip tie this up out of the way. And then we're going to take our long wiring harness and we're going to zip that back into place here. And you've got your 2 leads. One will go to the left this way, and one will go to the right this way. And finally, you have your 2 power leads that will come up through the front and plug into your battery right here. That's gonna wrap it up for our install today. If you like what you see, leave a like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, leave those in the comments section down below. Don't forget to check us out at tsportline.com.